What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Do we have a viral episode for you? Definitely not the title that Taylor just spent a bunch of time working on, but
Yeah, you could have let me know you had that one in the back pocket.
I didn't. It literally came to me as it came out.
Oh, you're a better man than I then.
I'm a very on the fly type of person. So we got Chris with us. If you've been a longtime friend of the show, as they say, Chris was definitely one of the earliest contributors to the podcast. In more ways than one. He has helped us get the whole thing set up. We still use the outline he created for us today, so we appreciate the support that he gave us early on. And he's a pilot, so occasionally he's just like, "Hey, I'm in town. You wanna let me sleep on your couch for a few days? Well, guest bed for a few days."
I've gotten upgraded. I don't sleep on the
Mhm.
couches off anymore. It's great.
Yeah, so he was in town, and we're like, well, let's do her again. And he was continuing to contribute to podcast ideas via the doc thing that he set up, and we're pulling out one of the oldies. We get to shit on Reagan today.
I, I like where we're going.
I
I
do.
can't see how it goes wrong.
Shitting on Reagan is always a good way to spend your day. And we're doing Reagan and the AIDS crisis. So, I guess we should introduce you to the people who haven't been here before.
Yeah. I first and foremost am a massive nerd. Fly fast planes on the various social medias. If you choose to go track me down and want to give me a piece of your mind there, more than happy to take the feedback. But I'm an airline pilot by day, and then massive nerd by every other time. Very much like Taylor and Jordan, liking talking about politics, have very much grown to dislike Reagan and see how his policies have basically ruined a lot of this country.
The
Uh,
world, just in
yeah,
general.
in general. And over the course of kind of earlier TikTok in particular, uh, got connected with Jordan, who then connected with Taylor, and we have all very much gotten along and become fast friends. And I have very much enjoyed that opportunity. And my job does allow me to have the superpower of just showing up at the airport, sticking my thumb out, and getting a lift. So I feel a little bit like Arthur Dent. I just don't bring my towels many places. Uh, but yeah, so that's kind of what I do. And over time, was able to help contribute with a couple of the early episodes in by both being a guest and helping doing some writing, and then continued to have a couple other episodes in the can, just down the list of just things that would be good ideas at some point, but didn't necessarily have like a due date and weren't culture relevant. And had the opportunity to come back on today and talk about the uh, the shocking similarities between Reagan's response to AIDS, Mike Pence's response to AIDS much later, and Donald Trump's response to COVID. There is a shocking through line there that I didn't even think existed until I started tracking it down. And I happened to live in Indiana at the time Mike Pence was governor. It was not a good time. I'm glad I moved to Michigan because
Has there ever been a good time in Indiana?
probably not. I'm sure when Notre Dame was winning championships, maybe. I have no idea.
Hey, they might have already won one by the time this comes out. Just saying, Ohio State.
We'll see how it ages.
Right.
I like to live dangerously, but the baseline of how Reagan approaches the AIDS epidemic effectively is to ignore it. Right? You know, stuff start cases start happening, people start dying of a mysterious disease. Don't know what, unattributed, can't quite figure out what's going on, and Reagan just kind of continues to ignore it. And then when it's not affecting people Reagan cares about, he really just keeps ignoring it and chooses to ignore it for, I think, 7-ish years until he gets around to it. Now, uh, and turns out, and goes in more into like kind of a blaming the people that are affected instead, in the victims, instead of what, should be the actual, like, trying to treat and mitigate a virus. Uh, and kind of struck me of like, hey, I lived through the tail end of that. We all lived through the tail end of that, but I remember the tail end of it. And then Trump's Mike Pence's response later to a similar AIDS outbreak in a rural county in Indiana versus how Trump's then response to COVID was virtually the same as Mike Pence's, which was originally to just try to ignore it and do nothing and tell everyone that it's fine and just go about your business. Like, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to have you make.
Well, it was so I thought didn't Reagan only take like a couple of years? I mean, only he took like 2 years to even like say the word AIDS as president while the AIDS epidemic was going on. I feel like that was about the timeline it took him to even acknowledge it existed.
Yeah. So let me kind of spiel through here. It was what is it? End of somewhere in the 82 by the time he said the word AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't acknowledge that that was an actual problem until survey notes. Look, have to consult some notes because I'm not as smart as most people. Yeah, it was 5 years for him to mention AIDS because it was 1985 when he mentions it, even though like it was a thing and it was named in I believe 1982. And then it continues that like through 1986 and 1987, like deaths are ramping up. The FDA and CDC are aware of this, and Reagan's still pretty much not doing anything until finally June of 87 when he signs the executive order to like, hey, maybe we should look into this for a presidential commission.
Mm-hmm.
Stunningly slow and lack of response while tens of thousands of people died on his watch.
Well, and even his own friends, because like Rock Hudson, an actor, personally appealed to Ronald Reagan himself, to I believe it was Ask France, because France wasn't just sitting on their hands doing nothing; they were actually doing experimental research to find this stuff out, and figure out how to treat it.
Mm-hmm.
And Rock was like, "I think if you recommend me for this program as being the president of the United States, the French will take me," and he did not, and Rock Hudson died.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the biggest thing that led Reagan to changing any of his, changing any part of his mind about the just factuality of in the reality of the AIDS epidemic was like in the mid '80s when a couple of his actor friends died and like Roy Cohn died, not from anything related to AIDS, quote unquote, according to them, and then them being like, oh yeah, it definitely was. So I guess we should try to do something about it now that it's affecting people that I know.
And unfortunately, if like you wait to respond to a problem for a whole nation because it's affecting people you know, it might be a little late because like that the the momentum of government is immense, but because it's immense, it's hard to change it quickly or it's hard to pivot and to get it going. But getting it going early helps mitigate the problem because that problem is gaining momentum the whole time too. So
Well, and so like and obviously I think all of us talking about this, we can see certain similarities between the Trump administration's handling of COVID, where it was like we just don't want to deal with whatever this is, and but there's a lot of not discrepancies, but there's a lot of differences because like AIDS was very much stigmatized as this is an LGBTQ specific disease, a gay man specific disease, and that's not the case with COVID, right?
No.
And so like
wasn't the case that stigmatization did not happen.
Right. And so like
Well, in a different degree, not with LGBTQ, but with the sheep and the non-sheep.
Right. No, yeah, for sure. But that was also the other thing is I feel like there was less, and I wasn't really alive during the the proliferation of the AIDS crisis in the mid '80s. You know, I was born in '90, so like all of that happened before my time. So I could be wrong, but I feel like there was less of a conspiracy based just asinine, ridiculous. Like we can't fight this as a country because this is politicized. It was politicized on it's a gay person problem, and so therefore fuck them. Who cares? But it wasn't politicized as a left versus right, and somehow only Democrats can get the disease or something to do with vaccines and tracking devices from Bill Gates or whatever the fuck they made up about that shit. And so it's a different there's similarities in how their lack of handling on the problem made the problem much, much worse than it probably would have been with the right amount of government attention as it came out. But there's a lot less of a comparison, I think, in just the way that a politicized America handles something that shouldn't have been handled the same way that the AIDS crisis was handled.
But you could very well lay the politicization of it at Donald Trump's feet.
Mm-hmm.
He chose to be like, hey, you're either for the economy or you're for, making people unemployed and ruining everything. And I think he saw it through the lens of 2020 is an election year, and if I have a bad economy going into the election, I'm going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean that's fair. I do think though that Donald Trump was a reactionary to the response of, the QAnon crowd of everything's a hurricane hits North Carolina and Democrats are, remote controlling it like it's battle bots and the fucking a fire in Hawaii and Democrats are laser Jewish space lasering specific houses and not other houses and shit like it's everything is a fucking conspiracy with these dumb like these they're fucking morons, and that was not the case. I mean, there was a lot of dumb people in the 80s, don't get me wrong, but like they weren't as creative in their stupidity.
Yeah. Well, they also didn't have the same platform. When you were in the 80s and dumb, the people in your town just said you were dumb and never talked to you. So they left you alone. Now with the internet, you can be dumb, but if you can find someone who wants to be dumb with you, you got a little group going, and then you guys get to be the in group. It gets to work out for you, and you get to feedback off each other's tinfoil crazy and just run with it. And then on top of all that, media literacy needs a bigger addressing in the country because a lot of people just look at something that they hear it on whatever, they get fed that propaganda, and then they're like, I have to believe it. It has to be true. And doesn't really matter once they believe it what you tell them afterward because they're stuck on that, like white on rice, man. Like that's all they're gonna stick to. And so once you get those sorts of things put together, you've now got misinformation and you've got these people building their own in group, and it that's their new social society. Where in the 80s, if you went down to the bar and started talking crazy, they were like, maybe you need to fucking leave.
Yeah, and you're probably right. It is probably the proliferation of the internet leading us to a place where everything becomes hyper politicized. And in that case, I just think where Reagan didn't want to touch on the gross gays at the time, so he just didn't want to talk about it. And it's enough of a marginalized group of people where the rest of the country didn't give a fuck until a straight white woman got infected with it, and then it's like, oh, any of us can get this. Now we need to pay attention to it. That is very different. Where in today's world, anything that happens that is tragic or dangerous or anything that has any negative connotation, before it's crossed the finish line, before the dust has settled, they are already looking at how can I blame this on the other team? How can I blame this on the people I don't like?
Yeah.
And I think Donald Trump's reaction, I think if it had gone into it the same way, we went into 9/11 as a country just dealing with an issue, or gone into even the recession as a country, and it's like, this isn't a politicized issue, just everybody's suffering and we need to figure out a way to get through this, he would have handled it probably a lot more head on than Reagan did with AIDS.
Yeah.
But because that's not the way that his base worked and he needed to appeal to them, he was like, yeah, inject some bleach and sunshine will make it go away. Like, Democrats are fucking dumb for telling you to take a vaccine that I am definitely have taken 4 different booster shots of that are experimental by now.
Well, on top of one of the good things, if we can say such a thing, that came out of the Trump administration is they did do their best to help ensure that a vaccine to a virus got out within what? I mean, it was 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, it was record.
It was like a year and a half.
and has proven to be safe and effective. So, like, don't get me wrong. So the fact that like Trump went and did that, and then his base was like, "No, I don't want to get Bill Gates giving the GPS signal," is next level of how like
Cognitive dissonance,
yeah.
like expert level cognitive dissonance. That is, it is impressive. Which, once again, going back to, because I just want to shit on Democrats all the time now because I'm so annoyed by them. But like, why the fuck was that not pushed? Like, why did we not hammer down on the fact that like the vaccine was a Trump thing?
Yeah.
And just let, so okay, well, you all took the vaccine, so you're saying Trump did the right thing? Okay, cool. So then why didn't you take the vaccine? Are you a sheep because you didn't do what Trump told you to do?
It's
I mean, I think it's that it wasn't like it took 18 months, and we think of that as a quick time, but Donald Trump thinks of that in the time frame that it was happening as like a lifetime. And so he was like, well, I got to do something. So I'm going to make up all these other conspiracy theories and just like random fucking shit about how this is what you can do. And if you're American, you'll try this. Like, that's just Trump's response to something not something that he can't control. Is he'll just make something up.
I think on top of all that, like when they were doing the COVID press conferences, and originally Pence was running them, they were just to try to give the general information. Dr. Fauci was routinely on him. It was a pretty normal cadence of thing. They were doing like the daily press conference. I think it was at 10 a.m. every day, and you could tune in, watch it for a little bit, and it would be replayed, at least snippets of it, for the news cycle at the top of the hour, every hour, 24 hours a day until the next one came out. And I'm pretty sure that caught Trump's attention. He's like, hey, they're getting airtime, and it's free airtime. Why don't I go get that? And you also started seeing him just like, riffing his ideas that were batshit crazy and dumb on top of, you know, regurgitating up other conspiracy theories he'd heard before. Truly next level how we got here. We as Americans should be a little more worried about.
Definitely portends what we're dealing with now.
The parallels are getting bad.
So I think that this is something that makes me a little bit more, I don't know if nihilistic is the right word, but looking at like people are like, the next 4 years are going to be real hard, and I'm like, this is the consequences of the actions that we're taking today, that we're going to have to deal with today. That's not a 4 year thing. That's a 40-year thing if we're lucky. If we're lucky, and this is why, again, looking at the consequences of the AIDS crisis and all of the people who ended up, dying, and all of the economic loss that we had from that time as well, because we live in a capitalist world and we've got to look at it from a capitalist perspective.
Yeah.
Like the economic loss from ignoring the AIDS crisis, and the economic loss from, or the human loss from ignoring the AIDS crisis, and just the medical advance time lost from ignoring the AIDS crisis, affected us for decades. And then we have this same problem with COVID, not so much in ignoring it, because I don't feel like as a society we ignored the AIDS crisis, but as a society, major swaths of society decided to ignore the solutions to the AIDS crisis that were or to the COVID crisis that was available.
Well, yeah, I mean, think about all the people that fought wearing a mask, or fought doing some social distancing, like all of the risk mitigation things that were trying to be put into place. There was someone out there fighting tooth and nail to not do it because of some perceived slight and why it would ruin America.
So yeah, I don't know. And now we have Donald Trump coming back in, and we have the grumblings of another virus on the horizon. And I'm not sure.
Supposedly it's not the same though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's bird flu and swine flu every year, and this is me being, again, one of those people who are like, yeah, we hear about it every time, so I don't take it seriously. And I probably didn't take COVID as seriously as I should have when it came out, for the same reasons. And I do think that there is something to be said for just it. We need to get information out about viruses and diseases that are on the um uh horizon that could potentially have massive impacts. And unfortunately, I think that the US government and the CDC has been a victim of its own success in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, you can look at polio right now
Hmm.
having a comeback because it they had done such a good job, and for the most part, the living memory of how terrible polio is had gone away. And
Hmm.
of all people, Mitch McConnell is like, "Hey, this shit really sucks, and I don't want other people to have to deal with it."
Yeah, that motherfucker probably had it at one point, I'm
Well,
assuming.
yeah, and it has caused him lifelong health complications too.
Hmm.
And he has been not in like he was like, I don't like it, and I
Hmm.
want to make sure he has said I don't want other people to be going through that, which is one of the reasons he chooses to like stand up for polio vaccine funding throughout the world and to have the U.S. government help fund it.
Yeah. Mitch McConnell, though, is one of those people who is responsible. He's the architect of modern American society and
Mm-hmm.
all of the problems in it. And then every time there's consequences of the his actions,
Yeah.
he's like, "Well, we shouldn't stand for this as a country." And it's like, "Motherfucker, you built this." Like he's the one who built Frankenstein's monster, who is now getting away from him. And I think that that's the problem with the modern Republican Party. You see it with the Cheneys too,
Mm-hmm.
is they're just mad. I think that the monster's gotten out of their control. Uh, I don't know.
Well, I think they
Yeah, I
just.
mean, just watch the movie Vice and don't think and not think that Dick Cheney wasn't unhinged.
Oh
Like
yeah.
Oh,
he was just directing it to not Americans. He was just directing it against brown people instead
mm-hmm.
of Americans, and so we didn't notice or care, I guess, back in the day.
Which ties back into how we got this very half-baked podcast episode started. Is that, that Reagan Reagan was able to ignore the AIDS epidemic because it was a marginalized community that people didn't give a shit about. And Cheney was able to get away with the absolute insane shit. I mean, crimes against humanity because it was marginalized communities that we as a society didn't give a fuck about. But that ability of allowing people in his position to build the structure to do that to those marginalized
Yeah.
communities and test the waters of how far you can get away with those things is exactly why we are where we are
Oh
today, why it's gotten we've normalized that type of insanity.
yeah.
I mean, it's just, I mean, it's racism, sexism, whatever you want to call it. It's all those like things where people with power don't give a shit about people who don't have power, and they got power a long time ago, and it's their God given right, right? So, what else do you have in here, Chris? About you got something about the governor of Indiana?
Yeah,
Um,
I didn't know anything about this, so I want you to tell us about how Mike Pence, who again another one of the people who I feel like is largely responsible for building the conservative party of today that he's mad exists today, like because they've gotten out of the control of.
Yeah. Uh, Mike Pence got his start doing some pretty low level, basically had a radio show for a time in the state of Indiana on AM radio, doing conservative talk radio. That eventually launched him into being in politics for, you know, the state legislature, on to U.S. House, eventually being governor of Indiana, then vice president, as many of us know him as now, and former vice president. Um, However, during his time in around 2015, there was an AIDS outbreak in a very small county called Scott County in Indiana. Uh, and they part of what part of what had caused this were some of Mike Pence's very own uh, policies. Because if you ever listen to one of his speeches, and unfortunately, as a resident of Indiana, I had to listen to this guy, but he would always talk about how he was a Christian and a conservative first. Like those were the things that were more important to him than anything else. And then he was an American. Makes no sense to me why they elected him out of this. out of control. But effectively, what happened was Mike Pence had signed a law to ban needle exchanges for drug addicts. And you have to remember, during 2015, there's still a massive opioid epidemic at this time raging. And one of these people that is involved with doing the opioids uses a needle, has HIV, and they're sharing needles. It quickly spreads to 140 cases. And now, one of the reasons I know this is because my wife worked at the Red Cross, and they were doing like firsthand things of having to ship stuff down to Scott County from both our area by Fort Wayne and Indianapolis, because little Scott County's American Red Cross was not set up to handle that level of, oh crap, we have real problems. And Mike Pence was painting it as a moral failing. These people were on drugs. They chose to do drugs, and the consequence of doing drugs is they get HIV. Why should it be the public's, the state's problem? So it then comes through is the state of India has their budget surplus. We can afford to fix this. And he was more interested in pushing out tax cuts and refunds than putting money into doing a short-term needle exchange initially. So by the time, that had happened, we'd shown that we were not doing the risk mitigation measures. Indiana was 49th in public health spending for GDP per person. Sorry, per capita, not per GDP. And they just showed they did not care. Mercifully, the state legislature basically bent him over and got him to do it, because they were able to allow the caveat of, all right, we're going to allow a needle exchange because this risk prevention is going to stop it spreading. And if it continues to spread, it's going to spiral out of control to next level epidemic level, outside of the, just the area of Scott County and surrounding counties. It showed that, the level of, hey, if I can ignore this problem, kick it down the road, I have the opportunity to basically ignore it, not really solve the problem. And who's it affecting? It's affecting people that chose to do this to themselves. Mm-hmm. Not that you would ever choose to give yourself AIDS, because that would be insanity.
Right, but you choosing to do drugs or be gay is a choice in the eyes of conservatives at large, and Mike Pence specifically, a big proponent of conversion therapy too. Obviously, seeing these as justifiable consequences to the actions of a society that has failed these people.
Yeah. And then it showed that once this program was implemented, only one more person contracted HIV. They effectively stopped it in their tracks by doing what we know worked. And they knew at the start of this worked, and it took them 6 years. So it goes to show that, when you kick the can down the road enough, and I can't prove this, I haven't asked Mike Pence, he wouldn't take my phone call if I called, but I think he looked at Reagan's response to it and went, why can't I just do what Reagan did? Worked out fine for him.
I had no idea that this happened in Indiana, and I think that's, again, going back to shitting on the Democratic Party and just progressives' ability to message. But if you have that kind of success rate of stopping something that has had that amount of time to steamroll by just implementing policies we know work, why do we not push these as the selling point of we know the solutions, and here's one of the times where we had an outbreak of something that we shut down with, listening to experts who understood how the disease was being transmitted and how we could slow this down and effectively stop it with some very easy mitigation methods. And not that all the mitigation methods are going to be easy. Obviously, COVID was an unprecedented situation. But
I don't know. I feel like what's who's going to hear that message, and if they were not voting for Democrats already, be like, oh yeah, actually that's a pretty rational way to describe the situation and how we go about things in the world, and actually I'll vote for you instead. I it's like a dunk on somebody who's not even playing in the same like game, you know. Like you're in one court and they're in a completely they're playing tennis and you're dunking a ball and you're like, I just scored, bitches. You know, like I hear what you're saying and I agree with you. Like there are some really good things that we can talk about that do affect a very, very large amount of people in this country, that Democrats have been able to do successfully. Um, but like, there's a
It,
lot of things also that just like Republican voters will never ever care about.
well, until it affects someone in their circle,
You
and then
know,
it becomes something
Then
that
they can still deny it, and they can still say, "Oh, this is your fault for doing said thing," and still blame the victim. So even then, I don't know.
one of the weirdest experiences I think I had anecdotally, just personally, was middle of COVID, and I changed internet services because we finally got fiber put in at my old house, and the guy who comes in to install it or bury the wire or whatever, hook it up, he's uh, first talking to me about just COVID in general, and he lost some people close to him about it, and like he was really big about like the social distancing, like we can't get too close, and he was like still wearing a mask even though we were outside and all of this. I'm like, okay, cool. The guy, like I respect, like he's taking more precautions than like I'm taking even at that time, but I absolutely respected his precautions, and so we're going on like outside at our distance talking, and then he like immediately switches into starts talking politics, which is just incredibly unprofessional in general. But it, I also want to talk about at some point, like when did it just become acceptable to people you're doing business with, people who are paying you to do a job, or you're out working for a company that you're public facing, and just suddenly it's okay to talk fucking politics? Like there was a time when that was just a fucking asinine thing to do,
yeah.
and I miss that time because now I'm like, you're a fucking moron, and I don't want to do business with your company anymore. Uh, just even if it was politics that I like agreed with, like why are you bringing this into this sphere where it doesn't belong? And especially because it's never politics I agree with, because people who agree with my politics are not dumb enough to go out in their professional lives and talk about politics, because you have to be a fucking moron to do that. Uh,
I mean, it's like I've seen listings for like because I browse Facebook Marketplace, and
mhm.
you'll see listings for like trucks and cars and various other things, and like they get political in that ad. And you're like, politics are not going to sell your 2002 Ford Ranger, my guy.
I mean,
I don't
Trump's
know. It's
supposed to buy
classic,
anything.
man.
You slap enough Trump stickers on something and they will fucking buy it. Like fucking uh but this motherfucker's out here like all about how COVID is just ravaging the country, and he lost people really close to him, and like all about taking the precautions, and then immediately switches to and this was after the election, and everything wrong in the world is suddenly Biden's fault. Like right now, like I don't even know if he was inaugurated at this point. Like, and he's just going on about how everything else in the world is Democrats' fault. I'm like, how are you living in this? Like, your people fucking think you're a dumbass for wearing a mask. Period. Let alone outside. Your people think you're a dumbass for getting a vaccine, and but you're like, no, these are the people, and I can just compartmentalize, because the I've seen the actual negative effects of this virus. That's a real thing and not something Fauci made up because he spent his entire life studying medicine so he could own the conservatives um at one point in 2020 when the Chinese virus got loose, I guess. And I literally asked him, I'm like, how are you able to reconcile this? And he couldn't explain it to me, but he was very, very much still in the cult without with one of their biggest tenets of, if you take a vaccine, you're a sheep. If you wear a mask, you're a sheep. If you were, and I'm like, you're the one being like, whoa, you stay back. I'm like, Okay, I'm good with that, but like,
I mean, there was a time there where some of the anti-vaxxer folks were convinced that they could catch diseases because from other people who are vaccinated, and they started wearing masks because of it. So, like, I'll take the win, but like, motivation matters.
That
it's
is that is something special right there.
and so like in the comments here, and I think that this is part of the problem is military bases, airports, any place you go into a public setting, Fox News is Fox, in air quotes, news is always on. In fact, I have a mutual, Trevor BWG, and he works for a specific institution I will not name to keep him under wraps for what he's doing. But at this institution, which is a public institution, they have Fox News on a couple of their televisions all the time.
Oh God.
And so he was just changing, he would go and he'd change the channel every day. And he's like sending it out in his Snap story to his mutuals. And so it's been this war because there was three TVs and only one of them has Fox News on, but they make sure that that's the one with the volume.
Oh yeah.
And so he'd go and he'd change the channel all the time, and then finally he's like, "Fuck you!" And he went into the parental settings and blocked the channel on that TV, and then they started putting it on a different TV, and he went in and he just blocked it on all three TVs, and now all the TVs are just staying off because they can't play Fox News. But it's a real thing that Fox News has played in these situations. I have another mutual who was in the military and is a reformed conservative, as he describes himself. Actually, going back to Reagan, he was part of the Iran Contra affair. Like he was on the
Oh
ground
God.
in fighting the Sandinistas. Like he's like, I'm sitting here listening to Ronald Reagan saying that we don't have anybody, engaging in combat right after I just got done shooting at these motherfuckers. Like he's out here saying that we've got no Americans on the ground engaging with this, and he's like, that's when I started to realize the government might be lying to us. And so but he had a was part of the change the channel campaign because all the bars in military based towns, and on military bases, it's all just Fox News, and this indoctrination runs way deeper than any of us. In fact, fuck Taylor, you and I had a literal former Nazi, former Klansman on the show at one point, who again reformed and has come around and now is trying to educate people on how you get pipelined into this. And it's just the depths and the fingers of how this propaganda just seeps into these spaces of our society where it ultimately ends up being, I guess, forgotten people.
Yeah.
I feel like, side note, I feel like Fox News should have been forced by the judge to call themselves Fox Entertainment after they settled their lawsuit to by saying that they should not be considered news. Nobody rationally would believe that they are a news channel; they are an entertainment channel. I feel like the judge should have been okay. We'll drop all charges, but you immediately have to change all logos, all company titles to Fox Entertainment.
Yep.
Just
Yeah,
do that.
I mean, I think that would have been a very reasonable and rational thing to do. It's false advertising at that point.
Right.
Like,
I think Dominion probably would have gone along with it, to be honest with you.
yeah.
I mean, Dominion was still going to get their money. That's what they cared about.
I guess.
I think Dominion cared about being vindicated that they're machines. I don't think it was about the money. I think it was about the fact that their product the integrity of their product had been undermined on a very massive scale by a organization that controls, the majority of cable network, quote unquote, news. And yeah, I think that vindication, they definitely would have went along with that.
Yeah. No, I mean it's fair.
Oh, it could have been.
I don't know. I mean, but Tucker Carlson had the same thing. He was sued over. Was that the same case where he was sued and said no reasonable person?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was
would.
it was resolved. It was revolved around the Dominion case. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I mean, yeah, but on the change the channels kind of campaign, it's also shocking. Like even like I was at a hotel gym and I refused to like leave Fox News on, so I'm on the change channel bus, and like flipped over to CNN because I hadn't watched them in forever, and I was watching it, and I'm like, this just is Fox News. Like they're
Mhm.
not saying anything that like you wouldn't have heard. You couldn't change over to Fox right now and hear the exact same crap getting pumped.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
like
it's pretty rare when they actually do something that's unique or just like not right wing adjacent propaganda. Like maybe it's not the level of propaganda, but it follows the narrative.
It's punditry,
yeah,
and punditry I think has become a huge problem. And I say that knowing that basically what I do is punditry, right? Like
No,
I
no, no. You don't do punditry. You do propaganda.
yeah.
okay, sure.
Yeah, there's a
That,
difference.
that almost stings a little more, but you know.
No, it shouldn't.
Oh, I get it.
It shouldn't sting. I think propaganda is a stigmatized word, but the meaning of it is just basically to promote a cause and to provide like talking points and information about it. It's not necessarily false propaganda. You know, you're not putting out false propaganda. You're not putting out disinformation. You are just propagandizing the progressive ideals, the progressive caucus.
So then
There's
what would you
nothing.
say the difference between punditry and propaganda is?
I mean, I think punditry. I mean, I should look it up, but I think punditry is probably more like a let's see expression of expertise in a particular subject or field.
Yeah, it's not
So
mutually
because
exclusive being a
well,
propagandist.
true, it's not, but I think like when you're on a news channel, like you appear to be an expert in something. And on social media, you can appear to be an expert, but it's a lot more difficult, I think, to like appear like you are the professional or you are an expert. Like,
Right. I mean, I think you have a point there because you're putting yourself on social media and nobody has to platform you. Whereas in
yeah,
Fox
that's
News, bringing this person on as an expert or CNN or whatever. Yeah. So
okay.
go ahead. I think you have an excellent point there.
No, I mean that's exactly it. Is like you can choose to believe that somebody is an expert on social media, or even if they're self-proclaimed expert, you don't have to believe that they are or not. But when they have a platform such as a tens millions of viewers, then you are automatically basically elevated to the like expert level type. You're supposed to be a truth source. That's the whole reason why they're considered news channels. And so, by definition, I think they're pundits.
Yeah. No, that is fair, and I do think that that is part of the issue with I mean, we've seen some of the ridiculous people that Fox News and even CNN and CNN or MSNBC parades out. Any of these cable news networks that rely on a constant stream of talking about what is going on, especially in the political sphere or the current events sphere. Uh, you can't. You can only report on what's going on so much before you run out of stuff to report on, and to have that continue going, you then need the commentary of people who are giving their quote unquote expert opinions on it, and that's where it devolves, I think. And that's why
Yeah.
I do a buddy of mine when we were hanging out a couple years ago and we spent a couple days in a hotel, and he was turning on MSNBC and I was like, this I hate all of this too because it's just punditry. It's just people giving their opinions on topics that are leading you to a specific solution or a specific way of thinking, and that bugs me as a whole,
Mhm.
which again is what I do. I fully recognize the hypocrisy in that, but yeah, I try to do it honestly, I guess, as honestly as I can, as one of the people in the live here um, uh, pointed out. You admit it and don't pass it off as anything other, and I definitely I don't try to pass it off as anything other, but I do recognize that obviously I've come with a very specific perspective and I
Mhm.
present information that I try to make sure is as factual as possible. But I definitely present it in a way that conveys the way that I feel or view this information. And I don't try to be, I'm not unbiased. I try to be factually accurate and make sure that the facts are unbiasedly presented in a
Well,
certain way.
so like the literal definition of a propagandist is a person who spreads ideas, facts, or allegations deliberately to further a cause or to damage an opposing cause. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're spreading falsehoods. Now, if you Google propaganda, it generally has a more negative connotation, but the literal definition of propaganda still does not infer that there's falsehood information being spread. So, like, we think of it in a negative way because generally it's used to hurt people than it is to help people. But what we're doing is propaganda too. But our goal is to help every American and not just line our pockets.
Yeah, I'm not getting anything from spreading my propaganda aside from trying to make sure that people who don't look like me and have the benefits of, straight white male American privilege are at least have a few of us out here talking somewhat on their behalf, at least recognizing that the struggles they are suffering from. And I do think that's important. But obviously, yeah, you are technically right. It's propaganda, and this is one of the things. Um, I again feel like I'm being a hypocrite about because when people get frustrated about talking about privilege, I'm like, I recognize privilege, and that doesn't bother me when that's put on. But like a lot of older generations, when you talk about the privilege that they had because of the generation they came from or the demographics that they belong to, they feel privilege as a very negative connotation. When it's like
Yeah.
it's not a negative connotation. It's just this is a privilege you've had, and you have some responsibility if you're a decent ethical human being to use that privilege um to help spread equality in some small way, shape, or form, or at least recognize that you have that privilege.
I
And
don't
now,
know. Sounds like a very pro-humanist approach, and not
fuck those
necessarily
humans.
one. I mean, not necessarily one shared by every Christian slash religious person.
Well, one thing that also kind of reminds me, like some of the similarities between like the various news channels, and especially what you have to go do.
Mm-hmm.
They need new content all the time. You have to
Mm-hmm.
feed the beast
Yep.
if you want to stay relevant and stay going. And
Mm-hmm.
they feed the beast 24 hours a day. Uh, and they want to keep you watching. They want to keep you engaged. They want to, like, they have their own engagement numbers that they go and obsess over, their own ratings to go obsess over. And that is what is paying their bills because then they can go sell the spare time to the advertisers and make their money.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. And I guess when you bring in a profit motive, and again, like I'm having to do a lot of self-reflection, and it's not self-reflection, but like it's admitting where there's a crossover here. I make some money doing this, definitely not enough to be considered I'm not making Fox News money doing this yet, unfortunately. And hey, I hope
or
one day.
Russian money. You're not getting any of
Yeah,
that Russian money.
the Tim
You're
Pool.
not
I'm
saying
not making
you
Tim
can't
Pool
Tim
Russian
Pool
money
money?
here or anything like that. I'm just I'm getting my the pittance that YouTube and TikTok for a few more days will pay me, hopefully, to put videos up, that kind of shit. But like, like I would very much love to make this the sole source of income that I get where I could put my whole heart and soul into doing this type of informational stuff. And it's not a dirty thing to make money doing um journalism, which I don't claim to do journalism by any means, but it's not to do advocacy, to do any of
Yeah.
that. It's just when you are willing to sacrifice the message or the goal of what you've been working on uh, for that profit, personal profit, is where it becomes a problem. But that's an accountability thing on a personal level a lot of times, especially when the courts aren't willing to hold people responsible for, their entertainment that no reasonable viewer would take as actual news. Uh, so where do you draw that line, and where am I, just patting myself on the back versus
Yeah.
like where does that line get drawn? Like where how do we structure?
I mean, the worst thing I think is, exploitation of surplus labor value. So you're not doing that. So in my opinion, you're. I mean, other than if you started like spreading like actual like going like the anarchisparian way of TYT and just going like the right wing like path, that would be the only other thing that would be bad. Otherwise, I don't. I mean, we all have bills to pay at the moment, unfortunately. Oh my goodness.
He sounds like a squeaky door.
It's like I really want to go dog outside. If you could let me out.
Uh, I don't know, and it's crazy too because now we're starting to see, and I don't say this lightly, Nazi era level propaganda going back to propaganda, and why it's such a negative word because like Nazis embraced propaganda, obviously, and that's I think really where that negative connotation really set in.
Well, yeah, and I mean, propaganda is often used as a way to control population and thought, and to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that the ruling class is going to get what they want, and they're
Mm-hmm.
going to make the people think that they got a mandate given to them. Uh, under a worst case scenario,
Mm-hmm.
there's tons of examples, and Nazi Germany is a great one where you know Hitler drove a narrative that was awful, and he kept driving it, and it ended up with millions dead,
Mm-hmm.
and the only gain there was the lesson that we don't want to let it happen again. Well, we're starting to see some rather disturbing similarities again.
And so back in the question of propaganda is propaganda okay when governments do it? If it's for reasons we view as righteous, like where because government propaganda generally has a very serious negative connotation for some very legitimate reasons, and governments have used propaganda throughout history, for both good and bad things. I mean, obviously, we were dropping propaganda leaflets on Nazi Germany to try to turn German citizens against the Nazi Party back then. And that was propaganda, but like it's a struggle because this is the thing is we've been talking about media literacy and communication to the masses to try to get back to a populism and a message of moving forward as bottom versus top rather than left versus right,
Mm-hmm.
and that comes down to apparent it comes down to effective propaganda, but what is effective and ethical propaganda, I guess, is a
I
good
mean,
question.
starting with it being as mostly factual as possible, I think is a really good ground to stand on for any information that you're trying to communicate. And then, you know, disparaging other people in order to improve your movement or your cause is probably another bad thing that you should avoid. So, like, if we were to say, like, we think universal healthcare should be for everybody, but except for X group of people, like they would misuse it, but we should all have it because it's really good. Like I think that would be probably a bad way to use propaganda for a cause that we would be remote, for. But obviously, that would be a asinine thing to start saying.
It would be, but like I guess the theoretical question I'm trying to get at here is we can't win the fight we're moving forward on without effective propaganda at this point. Like
Yeah, of
there's
course.
just no way to do that. And effective propaganda is what we've been talking about is like what can progressives and the Democratic Party and labor movements all do better as to get their message out and effectively propagandize people into understanding the benefits of these policies and these organizations for them. And where does the if we were to set up an ethical infrastructure that was enforceable, put that together, because that's where I guess I'm struggling with this, because it's really easy to just be like, all right, we're going to fall into the ends justify the means, and I can say what I need to say to make sure, because what I'm trying to get to is important and good and ethical, and if I need to say something that's not necessarily true or not necessarily okay to get there, and eventually that ends up becoming the Nazi Party, that ends up becoming MAGA, that ends up becoming, these people are like, hey, the ends justify the means, and I believe that this is where we need to be, and I can say and do whatever we need to do to get there. And I'm fully embracing the fact that we need to improve our messaging and as a result our propaganda, but I don't want us to fall into those pitfalls of like, how do we hold ourselves accountable in those situations without
Well,
kneecapping our own messages.
I mean, there's two things. So, like, branding Democrats, they're talking about propaganda. Like, that's the whole book. Is like, how are we communicating our cause? Is like, we're discussing how the more effective way to spread propaganda is for the Democratic Party. I think when you start, when you only do propaganda in the promotion of a specific cause or idea. And if that cause or idea is to raise the standard of living for every person in the world by promoting, healthcare, housing, education, I don't.
But what if
Sure,
the
there.
idea to raise the standard of living is personal responsibility, and those single mom welfare queens are just, they're just too lazy to go get a job. So therefore, what we are doing by making them starve to death and go unhoused with their infant children is really helping them, because we care and love them the way that
Well,
Jesus
so
would.
then we would need to spread the opposing propaganda that saying no, that there's no basis in which that factually is correct, and by you saying that, you are intentionally spreading falsehoods, and you should be ridiculed for such. Like, we have to fight back. We kind of are, but I mean, I like Biden's State of the Union address in 2022 or whatever, when he went and had like the red background. He was like, some Republicans, like some of them are like insane or whatever. Like, I thought that was really appropriate levels of calling out what should be called out.
And I agree. I absolutely do agree. And I think again, in the comments here, Jenny, who has been great contributing through our live session, if say nothing if you can't say the truth. And I really do think I really do think that that should be the requirement, is if the propaganda you are putting forward is not rooted in truth, if you cannot back this up by truthful factual evidence, it should be held to the highest account of scrutiny and accountability. And I think that that is really where uh, we have failed as a society and media.
Well, especially with frickin' Zuckerberg saying, "Oh, we're no longer going to do what are they? He's no longer doing fact checking or no
Mhm.
longer doing community notes, and now he's doing like
Oh, he gave up on
some.
community notes too?
Maybe he's going to like what community notes, like what X is doing now, where it's like people are saying this instead of like calling it a fact check,
Mhm.
which is
Well,
like fucking insane."
yeah, Zuckerberg will say whatever he needs to try to make people feel comfortable around him enough to like allow his entity to continue.
Well, and now Meta is laying off thousands of people to replace them with AI, and he said that society needs more masculine, or social media needs more masculine energy, was a thing I saw from him today. Because definitely, when I think masculine, I think Mark Zuckerberg. Fucking.
Yeah. I mean, just
Can
that
we? Okay.
robotic form of his, the robotic way that he moves and talks is just the most masculine thing I can think of.
Can we have the cage match between Elon Musk? We were promised a cage match between Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. I remember this specifically. They were gonna have a cage match. And
We
we
could
were
have
all
Joe
making bets
Rogan.
on who was gonna win, but everybody was gonna win. Like we were all gonna
Right.
win. Which if they had a cage match, we could do celebrity death match. We could have a real life celebrity death match, and no matter who wins, we all win. And when are we getting that? Is that a thing that's still happening? Can we make that happen?
I
'Cause
mean, if we
that's the masculine energy I want in this world.
I
if
want two people to duke it out to sort their differences out. Why would we have them talk?
Exactly.
Right.
That's what they all keep talking about. How they're these alpha males, and we need more masculine energy. And I don't think of any two people better than to throw in a ring and just let them beat each other to death. We need this as a society. Like
I don't
this.
know. I think you end up with a fight that looks worse than the Mike Tyson and Jake Paul fight. Somehow worse than that fight.
You end up with Musk, who is horribly out of shape, going against Zuckerberg, who is in shape and knows how to fight. I'm pretty sure that, like, Musk can't tweet his way to winning. He's going to get punched in the face, and then it will be over. And, you know, that will break Musk, which he'll then find a way to break the world.
Yeah, I mean, and
Because
you know
he'll be
what?
like Bender, where he's like, everyone saw me get embarrassed. I wish you would all kill yourselves.
I appreciate the Futurama reference.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know though, because like Musk has a lot of weight to throw around, quite literally. And he's much larger. Like I just feel like if he laid down hard enough, he would have.
Are you saying why doesn't the bigger one just eat the smaller one?
Yeah,
Or sit on him or something.
If he just laid down hard enough, he has a solid chance of sleeping his way to the top on this one.
Gonna
And
go full Snorlax.
I want to see it, like I said, and we were promised this, and I feel like as a society we've really been done a disservice that the fact that Zuckerberg and Elon Musk have not been in a cage together to beat the shit out of each other, and I want my money back, just in general. It's like whatever money I've ever spent in this society, I think I deserve it back at this point.
Maybe if we
Fun on life.
maybe if we petition Joe Rogan, he'll like try to get them both to fight or something, you know, on his show.
Hey, could we get Joe Rogan in on it too? Like he used to fight, right?
Come on,
Like,
Joe
that
Rogan would
be-
absolutely destroy them.
I know. We can do like a tag team thing. We just need one more person.
Hmm.
Who would be number 4?
So you got Zuck and Musk versus Joe Rogan and somebody else, or
Yeah.
Joe Rogan
well,
mixed with.
They'd have to pick teams. It would be a tag team thing in where they tag them in.
Yeah, I think it would be Musk and Zuckerberg are like the team captains here.
Got it.
And each of them got a teammate. So
So,
Rogan would
yeah.
have to pick a side. Or
Musk for sure.
Maybe they could just go WWF style, where like they pretend they pick a side and then they just do something dumb like switch sides or go in everybody against each other for no apparent reason.
Well,
Fuck, Linda McMahon's about to be in the Trump cabinet. We could just throw her in.
I was about to go that direction. I'd love to see Vince McMahon get punched in the face for real.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
that would be awesome.
So, like, throw him in there. He's a big guy too, so you know, you pair him up with Zuck, you put Rogan with Musk, and then you know you've got you got a little bit of drama, a little bit of action to go there.
I'm all for this.
How about John Cena? Like, just throw some John Cena in there because that's just makes everything better.
Well, then you have to throw the Rock in there, and the Rock.
Well, if the Rock goes, then Kevin Hart needs to participate.
Shit. We're back to an odd number.
Yeah, we're getting a lot more people involved in this wrestling match. It might be a WD special or something like that.
This could be a whole WrestleMania.
Yeah,
I can't wait for the Netflix buffering to.
if we're going idiocracy, we might as well at this point just go full idiocracy and go Monday Night Rehabilitation on the whole system. We need monster trucks involved at this point.
I'm throwing Terry Crews just for the idiocracy reference.
Oh, that looks like we got a Bezos. Bezos would be a good one. All right, yeah, we had a little bit of a connection hiccup there. I don't know if that came through on everybody else's end, but yeah, I think Bezos. I would just love to see Bezos get punched in the face. That would be great. I'm down for Bezos being included in this.
And he would round up. We'd be back to an even number now.
We're back to an even number. There we go. We've got
Billionaire Battle Royale plus a few WWE stars.
I'm glad we didn't get on too many tangents on this. I really,
No, I mean, we really stayed on the issue of AIDS
it
and
really
Reagan's
was people
response.
shitting on Reagan. Maybe someone can reanimate Reagan and have them on their team too.
Can we
Yeah.
just throw Reagan's dead body in the middle of it, like halfway through though? Don't tell any of them we're gonna do it, and then just like from the rafters, just drop what's ever left of his corpse. Like we can just dig him up and just drop it in the middle. Yeah, I'm feeling good about this, guys. America isn't lost after all.
And this is probably the special show that's going to save America, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. We really actually need to do it like tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome, guys. Yeah, this was a super unplanned show. And Chris is like, yeah, let's do it. And he's like, I'm gonna write an outline on a different topic. And when he brought the topic up to me, I'm like, that's a bold move, Cotton. But he's like, I'll get it. I'll get it.
I may have said, how hard can it be?
Mhm.
And that was like the second time in 2 days I've said that, and it bit me in the ass. So you'd think I'd
Yeah.
learn from the first one.
That's like Minnesotans saying like the Vikings are going to win the Super Bowl this year. Like it's our
Right.
year.
it's always our year until it's not.
Hey man, the Cubs fans eventually got it right. It just took like 100 and some years.
So yeah, and then we realized that like a year ago he had wrote an outline on how Reagan ignored AIDS, and he's like, yeah, I haven't gotten all the research done for the one that I thought I could do in the couple hours here today. So we're like, yeah, we'll do. So this was our how Reagan ignored AIDS episode, which ended in a WWE match.
Cage match between Zuck and Team Zuck and Team Musk.
And I am not mad at all about how this turned out. So
No?
this
Dig
went
it.
places it wouldn't have had we planned anything, and that's not a bad thing. I'm happy. I'm happy with 'cause we talked propaganda in a way that I think propaganda actually needs to be talked about, and I do think that actually warrants more of a conversation going forward.
You had some self-reflection.
I did.
Gave the opportunity for others to enjoy that, which is
Mhm.
good.
So yeah. We appreciate all of you guys joining us, especially for this most half-baked of rides. This was a Cheech and Chong episode for sure.
Yeah,
Dude, where's my car?
But we appreciate y'all, especially we're finding our footing like all of you in this brave new world, the new America that we're living in, and trying to figure out exactly where our content fits in this. So we appreciate the fact that you guys are joining us on this ride, because sometimes this is what you get as we're figuring out the direction. So we love y'all. Again, if you want to support us, so just watching, listening supports us more than we could ask for. That's why we do it. But financially, if you want to support us, because we have to pay for things and that sucks, we got subscriptions on Patreon and on YouTube that we appreciate you guys doing that. We also have merchandise on offjoewagon.com, both for the podcast and just regular Off Joe Wagon merch. You can get my sweet sunglasses that I only do not wear in the podcast, as everybody seems to point out. And yeah, and then, we've got ways where you can buy us a coffee or just support us financially in whatever way you guys see fit on our link tree in the bios on any of the socials that Let Them Eat Toast or Off Wagon has pages, so we appreciate that as well. We love each and every one of you for hanging out with us. We love each and every one of you in the lives for hanging out with us as well, and we will see you next week.
That's right. Thanks for coming, Chris, on the show again, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.